Is there anything more joyous than a wedding? Friends and family getting together, free drinks, free food. A third thing, free drinks. I said free drinks, but free drink, it's pretty good. I enjoy the free drinks. But is there anything more horrifying, tense, and just stress-inducing than a wedding set in the Game of Thrones universe? No. Absolutely not. Nothing builds tension and horror and just the feeling of impossible dread and just suspense of just horror and just, oh no, oh dear, oh god, no, something bad will happen, than a wedding in Westeros. I don't care who's getting married. I don't care if I've already seen the scene. I'm just rewatching the scene. Knowing this wedding takes place in Westeros just makes me sweat and dread and just gets very scared. So this week we had a joyous, wonderful royal wedding. And because, set in the Game of Thrones universe, it ended in bloodshed, tears, horror, and nightmares. And, when they're actually doing the vows, everyone was just real sad. And then the king maybe died? Or he fell down. He fell down a couple of times this episode, but I think maybe he died. Weddings are just no good in this universe. And they're just so paramount to, what happens in the universe. So we just see so many. They never work out. I'm trying to think of one. Tommen's wedding? Maybe didn't have someone die or kill someone else or you do something horrific. But I'm trying to think about it. Horror, disgusting horror. Oh god, oh no. Tommen. I think it's Tommen. Tommen is the only man in Westeros to have a wedding where no one died. And it wasn't one of the most traumatic, moments for everybody involved in the wedding. So in our most recent Game of Thrones wedding, we have a horrific fight, mostly just a one-sided, just mauling, just a massacre of a duel, like a one-on-one punchy punch fight, but it didn't seem like the other guy took a swing, and we never really see kind of what happens right before the fight, and we don't even see who's fighting at first, and I found that really interesting as well, because it was kind of like the horror and the tension of what's happening. You see guards rushing in, and there's this kind of horror of oh my god, are we going to get full Red Wedding style? But it comes back down to no, just a little squabble between the two men that are in love with the two people getting married, but they're in love with, and they're going to be the boy toy sex toys of these two royal wedding people. And one of them, our bodyguard, sexy bodyguard boy toy to the queen, I guess he didn't like that idea. All episode, he's just very angry about this idea. He, derogatorily calls himself like a whore, and he doesn't seem very keen on it all. During the whole wedding, he's got this very constipated, angry face, can't even look at her. So it was I felt like something might happen, but not seeing exactly what the guy said, except for being hey, you and me, we both love, the other person, let's keep this hush-hush between us. And it was a bit sinister, but it wasn't so sinister where I'm dude, you don't even know sexy bodyguard boy toy. He's gonna kill you. But then it cuts back. He kills him. And he doesn't just kill him. He properly mountain viper kills him. The guy had a hole in his face. Horrific. Just, I don't know. I felt like the character we have been brought up with in the limited tiny scenes we get over the 10 years the show has taken place over, or however many years, I don't know. Was there a time jump this episode? It's impossible to keep track at this point, so I really don't know how long since they've had sex. Have they had sex 100 times? 0, just the once? It's impossible to tell, but he's very grief-stricken over, ruining his honor and his legacy as a Kingsguard bodyguard dude or whatever, and he's all oh no, but I had chastity or whatever, but I had sex with her. I don't know. I find his motivations kind of bizarre. I feel like his honor, it's okay, I understand that he's super honorable, but I feel like we haven't got enough of him where at the end of the episode, after he's murdered this guy, after he said some stuff, presumably after what we heard them say, he then goes and Sudokus himself. No, sorry. Hold on. Seppuku? I'm probably saying it wrong, but seppuku. He goes and, seppukus himself and, self-suicide due to honor and disgrace and lack of honor and all those things. But then the queen is don't. So presumably he doesn't, because that would be weird if she's don't. But then, it turned out he did. So presumably he doesn't do that. But he's so, riddled with guilt that he's doing that where I don't think they built up enough of that honor and that being so much a part of his character. Because a lot of it feels like kind of flirting, and he's been a bit more timid compared to her. She's been more flirtatious, but the whole time, like every scene they're in, I'm like, well, they're flirting. And then, they had a flirty scene when the big buck deer in the forest, and then the next scene, they had sex. So I don't think there's been enough kind of character work for him to have this moment of murder a man, go to kill himself because his honor's been disgraced. I don't know. I feel like somehow we're getting so much with all these characters, and yet somehow not enough at all to like justify these huge moments that we've seen in this episode. That being said, on the flip side of that, I feel like the king greatly benefits like from time skipping over this long period of time. Who knows how long it's been? 4 years, 8 years, 10 years? I don't know. But I really enjoy the idea that every episode we cut back to the king and he's just like more decayed, more rotting. And you're kind of like, oh shit, like 2 episodes ago he had like 2 fingers gone. Now someone touches his hand and he's like, he's like coughing like his golem or something. He's like, oh, King Mysterious. And he's got that arm, the arm is all decayed and rotten. And he's just like so far gone in this episode where I'm like, well, surely a lot of time has taken place, or we didn't really see how bad it was last episode. But I really enjoy that kind of like, lots of time is taking place between each episode just for his character and seeing how decayed and how kind of slow it is, where each episode people are like, he's gonna die. And like, as Otto says this episode, he could die tomorrow, in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks, in 2 years, in 4 years, but he is dying. Like, it's clear at this point he won't be an old man. And the whole episode has that kind of tension because there's a bit where he, first arrives at the Driftwood, the sea place with the dreadlock Targaryen, no, Valerians? The white dreadlock guys, with those impeccable wigs where you're like, is that even a wig? I can't tell. But he arrives there and he's just so sick, like that travel, like, just seeing him on the boat and they're like, got the bucket being like, you want to chuck in the bucket, King? And he's like, I'm fine. Why did you go? And then later she's like, he should not have come. And I'm like, what? Why would you go? Just like send a raven or like, I don't know, the hand of the king or just somebody. Like, you didn't need to go. He arrives, speaks for like 2.5 minutes and is like, are we done? I must go lie down. You did not need to go. You are killing yourself. What are you doing, king, who's never made a good kingly decision in his life? Just the worst king. So old sickly man king, he decides to remedy the wounds and marry his daughter to young sexy dreadlock kid guy. And so young sexy, totally not a wig dreadlock guy, he's like, hey, I don't really like girls. And she's like, hey, I don't like you either. And they both decide they can do, we'll marry and be, together. We'll do the sexy sex. But, after that, we can do what we want. And it's like, okay, hey, this is all fun. This is all very, like, neat. And it feels like everything's working out perfectly. So, of course, when they get to the wedding, those 2, sex toys on the side have a big fight and one of them dies. And before all the horror and heartbreak of the wedding and all the things that happened in the wedding at the end of the episode, I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed that Rhaenyra was kind of like, hey, I've learned from Daemon that maybe, we can do the wedding thing and the marriage thing and all that stuff. But on the side, who knows? I am the queen. I am the law. I really love that she kind of learned from what he was saying in one way, even though he kind of was manipulating her and all that stuff last episode. But I did really enjoy all of that. Obviously, it ends in heartbreak and horror, but, this is Game of Thrones, House of Dragon, whatever. But apart from that kind of high school drama-y kind of, Degrassi High kind of, melodrama that's going on between all the characters and the way it kind of transpires, and then it Game of Thrones itself with some violence at the end at a wedding, I found this episode to be kind of dull, a little bit lackluster. I think last episode I was so surprised how much I enjoyed it, but now I'm thinking back on what it had that none of the other episodes had, and what this doesn't really have is Daemon. Matt Smith of House Targaryen is just the best actor in the show. By far, Daemon Targaryen is way beyond any other character in terms of kind of like fascination, interest, like likability, but in this kind of gross, horrible way where I'm just like fascinated to see what he's going to do next. So I'm kind of enjoying that perverseness of the character, even though I don't agree and like the character. Very kind of Joffrey-esque. Like, it reminds me of, or Tywin, where I'm like, I'm not agreeing with anything he's doing, but every time he's on screen, I am captivated. And Daemon's giving me something that Game of Thrones does the best, where it gives me a character that is just incredibly and impossibly unlikable, but I'm liking them. And the only really big scene we get is the first scene where we get this awesome, cool, new, charismatic, fun, likable, kind of like, I don't know, just really interesting character. She's riding a horse. She's like, I just need to go horse riding with you. And she rides off, and we get all these beautiful shots of the horse riding, and it's all cinematic and beautiful. And then she meets this mysterious stranger, and he looks like a character from like a video game where it's like, you cannot pass here, I'm wearing a hood, do you want to buy some stuff, like some stock for your journeys, traveler? That kind of vibe. But then it's like, oh no, it's Matt Smith, Damon. And then Damon literally says nothing, and she just keeps monologuing to him, and we get so much from her character, and we do this really great thing with Game of Thrones and House of Dragon can do, this universe can do, where it builds up a character so beautifully in such a short amount of time. And I'm just like in love with the character already. I'm like, she's awesome. And one thing I'm kind of like, she's so like headstrong and driven. And I don't know, I'm like kind of confused why she hates him so much. I feel like these two really like strong-headed, powerful people could like join up. But I guess, you know, two powerful people that want to be on top, they like, you know, he wants someone who's more submissive, I suppose. And she doesn't like that he's kind of like a dick as well as being powerful and controlling. So they don't vibe. But I'm also like, oh, I wish they could get together and like be happy. But then she says some, you know, kind of dick joke-esque kind of things, like, oh, I didn't think you could follow through, or finish up, or whatever, haha, dick joke. And then he smashes her head in with a rock because the horse freaks out and crushes her back. I don't know, it seemed a little close to being a bit, like, farcical and silly, the way he's just, like, touching the horse, and the horse is like, no, 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 no. And then she falls down, and immediately her back is broken. It just felt a bit like, oh, I thought he might do something more than touch the horse, or I don't know, it just felt a bit like they were trying to play it one way, and it kind of fell into the kind of silly camp a little bit. But then the horrifying moment of him like walking away to just leave her to like bleed out with her back broken, and she taunts him with the dick joke, and then he's like, actually, I'll smash your head off with a rock. And then we get the psh, you know, smash cut of the fish, and it's like, usually when they do that, it's like implying that like he would have cut her head off, you know, the way the fish's head was cut off. But then it's like a rock, so presumably he just smashed it in. Or he severed her head with a rock. It's so horrifying. So in the end, I think this episode will go down as one of the more uninteresting kind of wedding episodes. Wedding episodes seem to always just be like the most interesting, the most fascinating, the most horrifying episodes of Game of Thrones. And I know this is a different show, House of Dragon, but it gives me that same vibe where parts of it were really brilliant and interesting, the way it was cranking up that tension, just building and building and building. But the end kind of result of it all didn't leave me with the same sense of like, oh my god, like I was shocked and horrified at the murder. But all these characters and all these events, the way it was pieced together was really well done, like on a filmmaking level. Like I think the way it was cutting between people, the way it was building tension without kind of revealing who was going to like do the like horrible violent blow, and kind of playing on your expectations that Game of Thrones weddings always, almost always, save a Tom wedding, are awful and end up violent and horrific and like terrifying. And so it's kind of playing off those tension, like Ramin Djawadi's score, where it's like everyone's like, hey, oh hey, dancey, dancey, hey, and the music's building, and it's like you can listen to it as fun, happy music, but there's this tension, this building kind of sense of unease throughout it all, and as everything's building, and all of that worked really, really well. But then at the end of the episode, where like the king falls and they're all crying and getting married, I was just left with a bit of like, oh, I feel like this was building to something more. And I think that sexy bodyguard boy toy, maybe we should have heard like the exact words that made him snap, because I feel like we heard a little bit where he's like, hey, we should, you know, or we just be cool with this. And that didn't really make me go, oh, the character that I've met over these first 5 episodes is going to snap because of that. It just felt a bit like, wait, what? He just went ballistic and murdered the hell out of that guy. Like, not just accidentally punched one too many times. He mountain vipered that guy till his brain was all mush, which just seemed way too far for the character that we've met. He's so honorable. He's more of like a Ned Stark kind of, you know, Jon Snow character at this point, where he's gone and done like a violent, horrible, you know, Lannister / Clegane / another bad character, Bolton, the kind of thingy. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment below. I'd love to know what everyone thought of episode 5 of House of the Dragon.